It all starts with one thought, one movement, one step to break the cycle, to start your journey. It's time to carve your own path, walk your own trail, explore endless greenery, cities and shoreline around you. So what are you waiting for? One path, one street, one step at a time.
Great, so now we're inside. This is a 100-year-old building. So when we started construction on the building about 2.5 years ago, this was originally a warehouse. So we changed this building into a ladder and lumber storage, into 21 kitchens, which you can see down on this floor. And then we have 2 bars, and then upstairs we have retail space. Currently we're using it as dining space, given the current climate, but eventually we'll have room for about 20 retailers upstairs. So the columns that you see here, these were a major part of the construction that allowed us to add this functional second floor. And it allows for this catwalk so that folks can be upstairs dining or shopping and still take in all the activity that's happening downstairs. A lot of the lumber you see in here between these tables and the posts up on the railings, this was all reclaimed from the original building. So one of our big intentions was to reuse as much as possible and maintain the history of the building. Retrofitting this to a modern day food hall was not easy. It would have been much easier to knock this whole thing down, but it was really important to us to maintain a piece of history for the Parkville neighborhood. So a little bit about the Parkville neighborhood is this was one of the industrial capitals of the area. So we had the Royal Typewriter Factory here, Hartford Rubber Works, Columbia Bicycle Factory. So the neighborhood is very industrial, a little Williamsburg-esque, a little Navy Yard-esque like in New York. And so it's really important to us to maintain that authenticity throughout the building. So this space will actually be retail once we're able to move more of the dining tables downstairs. So think food retail, traditional retail, smoothie shops, food that doesn't require a hood to cook downstairs. We really wanted to leave the space open here so that you could, whatever you were doing on the second floor, whether it was dining or shopping, you really got the whole experience and the hustle and bustle. We like to think of it as like a mini main street in here, and so that was really important to keep that feeling in the building.
Movement with purpose.
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 My name is Daniel De Jesus. I've been running with the impaired about 5 years. What keeps me motivated is doing exercise. The way Kelly support me is by getting me supplements or nutrition for my running exercise. What the most important thing that motivates the half marathon is meeting other people and finish the race.
Hi, my name is Bruce Whitney from West Hartford, Connecticut. I've actually only been with Daniel for about 3 or 4 months. I actually haven't ever run with him yet because of the COVID, but when I got assigned to Team Daniel, we've done some social distancing walks around Bushnell Park where he lives in Hartford. I got inspired by my son, who's an elite runner. When he got out of college, he became involved in Achilles and ran with a wheelchair athlete. And as a proud father, I decided I should also give back. So when I retired, I decided to become involved in Achilles. I have run the Hartford Marathon many times on my own. I'm looking forward to hopefully next year being able to run it as part of Team Daniel. Running's a great individual sport, but being part of Achilles has allowed me to expand to others. And having walked with Daniel, we've become such good friends. We've talked about the Red Sox, we've talked about family, but we've also talked about nutrition, what it means to exercise, and Daniel truly inspires me. He's going to run the Hartford Virtual Half this year on his treadmill, and he's going to do it with an incline of 12. So I will be doing the Hartford Half as well virtually in support of Daniel.
I am Roberta Brown. I've been Daniel's guide for about 5 years now. I take one day at a time with Daniel by talking to him about what his goals are, where he wants to be in life with running, with his running life, and training with him occasionally, and then being in every race that I can with Daniel. And there's probably 3 or 4 races a year that we do together when it's not COVID. Oh, the most rewarding part about being involved with Achilles with the Hartford Marathon is being around all these amazing athletes who work so hard to be here, to run and participate with all the challenges that they have, and seeing the joy that they have in reaching their goals, finishing a race, being in the park before and after the race and during the race is really a fun, amazing experience. Cheering runners on, it's really awesome.
Hi, my name is Joe Slupski. I'm from Wethersfield. Well, for 25 years, I was head of the recreation division of the Wethersfield George D. Ritchie Youth Soccer League. I finally stepped down from that last year. Now I'm involved in veteran affairs. I help different veteran support groups, being a Vietnam veteran myself. And also during the pandemic, I've helped out in the food drives, distributing food at Food Share. I started running it in 1999, and I've run it every year since. And for one thing, it's close by to my house. And I live in Wethersfield, so it's only a few miles from my house, and I love the time of season, the scenery. The routes changed over the years, which is nice that the routes changed. But the entertainment on the course, the people, the volunteers, it's just a great experience. I try to live by the moment and just live one day at a time. And I realize that in my position, I actually am very fortunate. Some people have it much worse than I have had it. I actually lived a long life, and I look at some people, there are many worse people who have it much worse than I do, so I am very blessed in my life.
Actually, I wear right socks, not for luck. I just want to avoid blisters.
No, I don't have a lucky pair of socks, but I'm a big fan of the Fox River Run Strong sock for races. So usually I'll be in those.
Absolutely, I have a pair that I love, and they're super fluorescent yellow, and they're lucky because they prevent me from getting hit by cars in this day of distracted driving.
Actually, I prefer a post-race dram of whiskey.
Or cheese gnocchi, but I like it spicy. So if I can find it spicy with like some bacon in it, then that's how I make it. I like to put bacon in mine. Or but definitely put some hot peppers in there.
Watermelon, not even close. That I can eat watermelon and do the minute I get in the door, because it's like you're eating and drinking water at the same time. It's fantastic.
Joe wins all day, every day.
Oh, I could finish it. But in terms of being competitive, yeah, that's probably out of the question, run backwards.
I wouldn't race Joe Gray at anything, and even if he's doing one of his crazy trail runs, I wouldn't do that.
Virtual racing.
We started playing Super Mario World, I think it is. It's the one on Super Nintendo. We found our Super Nintendo in the garage.
Trying to eat well and run, it's probably the best I've been in my life with handling those two things.
You know, you have to have a plan, but run the mile you're in. It works for races, it works for work, and it works for life in general.
I don't know, I guess anything having to do with like gratitude and just being grateful for life in general.
Don't lie. That's it. Be honest.
Hey man, I'm living it.
Man, I would love to do like space travel, you know, go around searching for a new life or something like that, or just exploring new planets.
Run the lawnmower for a town and just cut the grass on the baseball and football fields and make sure they're striped and the weeds aren't, there's no weeds. That would be my dream job, sit on a lawnmower.
I've run on 6 continents. I've pounded out thousands of miles on the Farmington River Trail in Connecticut. But if I had to pick one, Central Park.
Probably between, I guess, broader spectrum like the US, or I like Norway and Switzerland and Austria. I mean, that's a bad question. I'm probably going to give way too many answers.
Rails to trails. Vernon is my favorite rails to trails. I love the Airline Trail in Colchester.
Single knot. Knock on wood, and close to 150 half marathons and marathons, I've only had to stop and retie once.
Not always.
I grew up playing hockey, and in hockey you tie your skates super tight and double, sometimes triple knot them, because obviously they're getting hit around a lot. So yes.
Let's just say we have a codependent relationship.
No, I probably should be paying attention to it more often, as I missed a couple meetings recently.
Unfortunately, yes. Very active on social media.
Prepare, execute, achieve.
You know, I'm not a big fan of living by quotes. I'm more so, you know, I more so remember quotes that came from people that I know, that are more tangible, people that are in my life, you know, that I talk to on a regular, as opposed to quotes that I read in magazines or books. So, you know, stuff that my parents have taught me, or things that I've just learned through life experiences, just to kind of apply that to my life in the present and in the future.
Focus. Everything you need is already inside you.
Movement with purpose.
Movement with purpose.
Movement with purpose. Movement with purpose.
Movement with purpose.
Movement with purpose.
Movement with purpose.
Movement with purpose.
Renee, DiNino here at the fabulous Parkville Market in Hartford, all in celebration of the Eversource Hartford Marathon. And we are supporting great community partners, great community organizations, and I'm super excited to be standing next to Enrique Rodriguez. He is the chef and owner of Las Tortas MX, and this, you guys, is his first restaurant. How awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Tell me about your restaurant, your food, and your dream to own your own place.
You know, everything becomes in place in the middle of the pandemic. I was actually employee at Mohegan Sun, an executive chef there. And because I had so much time off, I became across with this opportunity, you know, to own a restaurant. I hear about the Parkville market, and I just want to be part of the community of this great project that to me it's amazing. So I'm just happy and thankful for being here.
So now you were just telling me your mom inspired you to cook. So what is it that you make here at Las Tortas MX that makes you think of your mom and represents your heritage? What's the one dish we should try that makes you think of your mom?
Yeah, so, you know, a torta is a Mexican sandwich that you go to a Mexican restaurant, and not every Mexican restaurant has a torta there. And if they do, it's not as authentic as the ones we have here.
Yeah.
Or, you know, when growing up as a kid, my mom used to make us tortas for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And the carne asada and the seasoning that we put in the meat and the way that we built it, the way that we cook the bread is just something that you can't find anywhere.
It means to you to be a part of this community here at Parkville Market?
It means the whole world for me. Me being in the restaurant industry for 20 years, and you know, run some restaurants, big restaurants. I think I left that so I can be here and be part of this community, be part of this great thing going on in Parkville Market, and just, you know, get people to try all the food for very affordable food, tasty food, and I'm just happy to be here.
Elbow.
Movement with purpose.
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 Hello, runners and racers. Welcome to a roundtable discussion about COVID-19 and how it has affected the sports world. We have some local individuals involved in the sports world with us, two great athletes, and one of the top executives from ESPN. We have Don Cabral, two-time Olympian out of Glastonbury and Princeton at Princeton. Don was the national 3,000 meter steeplechase champion and record holder for a period of time. As we said, two-time Olympian, one-time world championship team member. He's got some nasty times, a sub 4-minute mile, 3:56 mile, a 13:22 5K, and a 2:19 marathon PR. He's also the 2018 Hartford Half Marathon champion, and we're really lucky to have him aboard. Now, guess what? In addition to doing international running, he's a local guy right now, coming back to Glastonbury and living in Hartford now, member of the Heartbeat track team. He is finishing up his last year at UConn Law and Business School. Hey, Don, thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here.
We have another athlete with us, Nikki Downs. You know, if you think about it, we have two of the big-time great athletes that came out of Connecticut schooling, Don Cabral in track and field, Nikki Downs in soccer by way of Hotchkiss and Yale University. Nikki Downs is now one of the top midfielders playing for Hartford Athletic right here in Hartford and Dillon Stadium. You know, he had 65 appearances for Yale University. And what that means, ladies and gentlemen, is he played in every single game that he could have in his 4 years at Yale University. Maybe it's because he liked to eat pizza at Sally's Pizzeria. But we also know he's got an international flair as well, just like Don and Patrick do. Something about the Right to Dream project. We might ask you a little bit about that later on, Nikki. And rounding out our roundtable discussion for 2020, the year that could have been, how COVID-19 has affected sports and the sports industry, is none other than Patrick Steigman. Patrick is Vice President and Editorial Director of Global Digital Affairs for ESPN. He is the content overseer for the development of ESPN International. And it is really a pleasure to have you here, because we know you got one of the big insights into the sporting industry that most people just don't have, Patrick. But beyond that, you guys might not know this, Patrick is an avid runner as well, completing over 120 half marathons, 24 marathons. Make that 3 Bostons, 4 New Yorks, way better than Donnie Cabral has ever done, and 3 Ironman, that's 70.3 milers. So Patrick, we're going to be asking you later on a little bit about how you've translated those virtual races, those actual races into virtual races. But you know, guys, right now I think I want to go back to our local runner, Don Cabral, right here in Hartford. Don, you know, this has been, you know, I've been a Hartford Marathon announcer for over 20 years. Obviously, we've never seen anything like what we've seen in the past 6 months. You know, not just the United States, but the world is hurting. And maybe you 3 guys can kind of help us navigate the trials and tribulations that people, especially runners, have been facing with COVID-19. So my first question goes to Don Cabral, our Olympian. What's been your biggest takeaway, and how has it impacted your training and your preparations for the future, Don?
This year would have been the Olympic trials for the 2020 games, which would have been, if I were successful, it would have been my 3rd Olympic team. And I guess what I've figured out from the past 2 Olympic teams is that even if I weren't an endurance, a distance runner, the preparation, the path to making the Olympic team is all about endurance. And it's all about managing all those challenges that come around. Usually you think of those as internal challenges, and over the course of several months, you have all these highs and all these lows, and your job is to kind of just stay focused. But you know, sometimes it's external challenges. 2012, I was a student and school was throwing everything it could at me. Going up in the years leading up to 2016, I had Lyme disease, and now in 2020, you know, the issue is just, you think you have a light at the end of the tunnel, and then it gets pushed back another year. And so it's really tough to deal with emotionally, but it's all part of the course, and it's what we expect. And it's part of what makes a distance runner is we're good at handling that adversity and keeping that long run focus. So that's been my big takeaway.
Okay. 2021, you know, first of all, when you say that, the fact that distance running almost kind of prepares you for this, 2021, definitely going for it, or is it something that you're going to figure out in the next 6 months?
Definitely going for it.
Good man, good man. Steeplechase, correct?
Yep.
COVID-19, is it affecting the training for 2021 still, or you're just going to power through?
You know, a big part of training is racing, and you can't go make an Olympic team on your first race. Your first race of the year, you need to practice callousing yourself, practice hurting, and kind of gritting your teeth and getting through it. And it would certainly, I don't think it would be our best team if the U.S. sent a bunch of people who had no competition experience in the previous 18 months or so. So it will definitely be important to practice to simulate those races. And there's only so much that time trials and virtual races can do. So right now I'm really hoping that some of these makeshift and impromptu races that have been happening around the country can keep going and kind of give American athletes that edge that we need to really be great.
Hey, Patrick, thank you for joining us. I know Wisconsin Oshkosh is really pleased with all of the stuff you've done for ESPN. You know, back in April and May, I sort of enjoyed watching the old World Series games that you guys put on, or, you know, the 86 Celtics going against the Lakers and all that. And then that stuff sort of wore off because we were like, okay, we want to kind of see the real thing. Patrick, like, so people want to know, what is the future of professional sporting events look like for like the next, I don't know, 18 months, let's say?
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. And I just want to go on record to saying that my marathon time, you can take Donnie's marathon time and double it and then add some, and you're about in my marathon range.
Okay, good callousing though, man. Good callousing.
It's definitely callousing. I will say this, look, the sports world came to its knees in March because of the pandemic. And, you know, at the end of the day, we do incredible storytelling and journalism at ESPN on our digital platforms, on our linear channels. But at the end of the day, what people care most about is live sport. They tune in for live sport, they attend live sport, they want to read about it and follow live sport. And that all went away, at least for a certain amount of time. And it caught everybody by surprise, obviously, not only from a global pandemic perspective and the real life issues that this was causing everyone across the world, but in the sports world, that sense of belonging, that sense of community, that sense of being part of something bigger and cheering on your team, being part of that tribal community that sports fandom is all about, stopped. Now, obviously, the world has started to re-engineer, and through a series of efforts around things such as the NBA bubble at the Walt Disney World in Orlando, or the MLS tournament bubble in Disney, or the NHL bubble in Canada. You've seen the sports world wrestle with the pandemic and try to figure out ways that we can get back to some level of normality, playing the events, staging the events from the ESPN perspective, broadcasting and covering the events, but doing them in a safe and responsible way. We're nowhere close to where we need to be in terms of understanding the long-lasting impact of this, but it is encouraging that across the world, sport is returning. It's returning without fans in the stadium in most cases. It's returning with social distancing for the media attending. It's returning with an awkward silence that has required some pumping in of fake noise to try to simulate the enthusiasm of a live sporting event. But we've started to see come back. We have, the NFL embarking, some college football embarking. Global soccer had a really successful stretch over the summer and is returning again this fall. So we're starting to see the return of sport, and clearly that's had an impact on ESPN, and it's our storytelling and our business. But I don't know that it's going to be back to what we expect anytime soon. I'm wishing nothing but great things for Donnie and his chances at the Olympics next year. But as we sit here today, we don't know that there is going to be an Olympics next year. And I think there are many unknowns as the world looks at this virus and what it means to set up sports events and in the future, even in a post-pandemic world. I think we're changed forever for some degree.
Yeah. When you mentioned, I like when Donnie mentioned the callousing thing. I like how you mentioned the unknown. It's the mystery of the whole thing. Maybe you can give us some we can wrap our minds around. What sport have you noticed has actually done well with the new shift? And what sport have you guys at ESPN noticed, like, wow, this sport is just not working with this the new setup?
Well, there's two obvious American sport examples, right? One, you can look at what has happened with the NBA, and one that has happened with Major League Baseball, at least in the early stages for MLB, where you had, pandemics spreading to 10, 15 different members of a team, postponing the games, rescheduling the season, a limited season at 60 games to begin with, challenged by, the spread of the pandemic. And not being in a bubble situation, even if people are being responsible and taking care and following social distancing and mask and other practices, you're at risk. And it's affected the sport. I think, fortunately, so far, it feels like they've rebooted and put more controls in place. And hopefully we're going to finish the Major League Baseball season. Yeah. But you take a look at the NBA and just the opposite. They literally said, we're going to go in a bubble. We're locking everyone down at Disney World. No one's leaving the campus. No one has any interaction. As media members, only a handful of media members can speak and interact with any athletes, and you have to be 6 feet apart and wearing a mask. They've done everything to try to control the environment as best they can. That's not realistic for some sport. And when you start looking at international sports like F1 racing or global football or global cricket, where teams have to literally move from country to country to compete, those are going to take a long time to come back in a successful fashion. It's challenging enough to try to do it in one country, let alone on an international scale. But clearly the bubble has worked. You've seen limited positive tests in NHL, limited positive tests in MLS and NBA. Some of the other sports that haven't had the bubble environment have not fared so well. Hopefully there'll be a point whether there's vaccine or other developments, scientific developments in the next months or years to come that puts us back on track. But clearly trying to lock things down and limit exposure has been the most successful path thus far.
Maybe that's a lesson like we can all kind of take away. Hey, Nikki, Patrick talked about the bubble, so there's no fans. So you're a professional athlete who plays a sport that clearly feeds off of the fans, right? We know the soccer stadiums are really raucous places. How about this? What has it been like? Because, you're still playing the season. And I think I know, like, maybe a couple of your games were postponed because of an outbreak, like maybe with the New Jersey team or something like that. But what has it been like, Nikki, playing in front of no fans?
Well, I mean, we are lucky enough that Connecticut has handled the virus as kind of effectively as any other state. So we actually are operating at 25% capacity for our home games at Dillon. So we are fortunate to have some of our local crowd in the stands, which is a huge advantage. None of the places we've played at for away games so far have had fans. So we definitely feel that contrast. Obviously at home, it's a big boost, even just at that kind of limited capacity to have some of the folks behind us gives you that extra kind of step. And then away from home, obviously, I think it works to your advantage too, where normally you might be in front of kind of a hostile group. We've so far it's just kind of been like playing a preseason game where there's no one around. So we've kind of benefited in both ways. But no, obviously it does take away an element of enthusiasm and spirit and just general atmosphere that I think a lot of players are used to kind of game in and game out. And obviously in the kind of the bigger leagues in Europe where they have returned with no fans, it makes an even bigger difference. And so that's why I think you're seeing more of the kind of artificial crowd noise and kind of different tools like that to kind of simulate the intensity and the atmosphere of what are really huge moments. But without the fans, they kind of feel less so in the stadium. So I think we saw that a little bit in the Champions League, which they did in Lisbon a few weeks ago, which is arguably, the biggest kind of sporting event every year is the Champions League final, and with no fans in the stands, sometimes that moment might have felt a little more subdued. But I think they did a good job, given the circumstances, to make it as kind of high stakes as possible. So
yeah. So Patrick mentioned the bubble. We know from the news and stuff like St. Louis Cardinals and Florida Marlins had some issues. What are the protocols like? So you're going to a game or a practice. How often, Nikki, are you tested? How safe do you feel when you're playing? Because I know, say, when I see Donnie Cabral running around, the highways and byways of Hartford, he might be by himself or like with one other person. But I have to believe, Nikki, that you're banging into people, you're going up for headers, you're tackling somebody at midfield. What do you as a professional athlete have to do even before you get into the stadium? How often are you tested, and how fearful are you that you might catch COVID-19?
No, I mean, I think the USL has done a good job implementing the necessary protocols for us to return safely. Every day we fill out a daily screener, kind of just to give the medical staff an idea of any sort of symptoms that we may or may not have. Our temperature is checked every day before entering the stadium, and then we're tested weekly or twice a week, depending on our game schedule that week. If we play twice a week, then we might need to get an extra test. And obviously, I think the frequent testing is the number one way to keep the virus under control, especially in kind of a limited environment like this, just staying on top of the testing. So no, I think I speak for all of my teammates when I say that we do feel pretty safe operating right now and going to practice every day. Obviously, because we're not in a bubble like some of the other leagues, there's kind of more of an inherent risk, like Patrick was talking about, just in your day-to-day life. But I think we are obviously trusting each other and the teams that we're playing against, that guys are being professional and taking all the necessary precautions to limit their risk. So obviously it's a season unlike any other, but so far I think the protocols have worked pretty well. And obviously you mentioned this earlier, but we did have 2 games postponed because of positive cases on another team, but those have kind of been dealt with, and now that team's back and playing. So as far as all of the protocols, I think they've executed them just about as well as they could have, given everything that's been going on.
Okay, cool. And being in Connecticut, like you said, does makes you feel good. Yeah, I have to admit. Hey, you guys are definitely motivated in your fields. The 3 of you are very successful at what you do. So you have these individuals who were quarantined or isolated in a small apartment or whatever. Maybe they've started to kind of come out a little more than like back in March and April. How about some advice for someone like the average American citizen right now who might be watching this? I don't know, I'll go Don first. Like what type of advice do you have for the average citizen on staying motivated when it feels like Patrick said, we don't know when this is going to end? And you're a distance runner. You must have some good insight. What do you think, Don?
Yeah, I think it's a hard situation to be in, and distance runners know this too, but it's always easier when you've got a team by your side. So maybe if you're that person living in an apartment by yourself, you don't think of yourself as having a team, but maybe someone else you talk to, you find that they are complaining about the situation or how miserable they are, or all the effects that people are seeing of isolation. And I think that's a great chance to think of what we're going through in some sort of positive light, to reframe it as a chance to be optimistic, to get to help someone else through it. So I'd say when it's challenging for you, it's challenging for someone else too. And the more you can kind of keep your chin up and uplift someone else, then the easier it is for you to get through it.
All right. I like that. I like how you mentioned a team. You know, we all need a team. Patrick, I have to believe that ESPN Digital, you promote teamwork within your employees. How have you guys changed the way you do things to stay motivated during this time period?
No, it's a great question. And literally my team is spread throughout the world. I have, editors and reporters and writers are working in 23 editions of ESPN.com around the planet on every continent. And it's a challenge, right? We're doing a lot of Zoom calls with each other every day, and Zoom fatigue is real. Very interesting advice I heard. We did an interview in our India team, did an interview with a motivational coach for the India cricket team. The cricket league for India, the IPL, one of the biggest sporting events in the world, was postponed and is actually now going to be held in a bubble in United Arab Emirates as a rescheduled event. And the motivational speaker for the team had some really interesting insight. He said, everybody's dealing with this pandemic collectively. This is not something that's happening in Florida and Connecticut and London and Brazil. It's happening in every part of the world. And it's hit every part of the world at a different pace, but we're literally all in this together. And one of his insights I thought was intriguing was that different personality types are dealing with this differently. If you're an introvert, working from home and doing a lot of Zoom sessions may not be the worst thing in the world, right? Right. If you're an extrovert and thrive on human, communication and being around people, it can be really frustrating and difficult. Right. And his point was they're actually going through the profiles of the India cricket players and sort of looking at personality types and trying to get a sense of how they're going to react into the situation. Or you saw Paul George in the NBA from the Clippers, talk very candidly in the playoffs about how he was struggling dealing with being in the bubble and the lockdown, and other people saying, you get to play basketball, it's a safe environment. Right. And the point is, each of us have a different personality, each of us have a different way to process this. Right. And I think being there for each other, communicating, looking out for each other, picking up the phone, doing a Zoom session, even when you feel like you can't stand one more, is actually really helpful. And it's been something we've really focused on at ESPN.
That's great stuff. Good advice too. Thank you, Patrick. Hey, whenever you do a roundtable discussion, you always have to do a non sequitur or a curveball question. That one's going to go to none other than Nikki Downs. So Donnie Cabral and Patrick talked a little bit about like the psychology of motivation and helping others and that. How about what advice would you give? Is there anything like an exercise or something you eat that you're like, you know what, you want to get through this COVID thing, do this exercise or eat this food? Like what are you doing, Nikki Downs, physically to keep yourself in the game?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, I think
I know it's a good question, Nikki Downs.
something that I found helpful, especially during the 2 months of March and April when we were back home and weren't allowed to kind of train together at all in any official capacity, was just trying to create as best I could my own routine every day to get myself kind of in a rhythm of training and structuring my day in a way that kind of, when I woke up in the morning, I was ready to kind of get after my training. Because sometimes I think especially for guys in team sports, you're so used to relying on your teammates to get yourself motivated in practice. And when we were in a situation like we were in March and April, where you're just by yourself and, we would have team meetings over Zoom, but the training bit was limited to individual stuff, that I think just kind of developing a routine that works for you, where you're finding a rhythm day in and day out, was something that helped me kind of stay on top of training and kept myself motivated. In terms of the food, I don't know. I mean, I think obviously I've been, as an athlete, I try and eat kind of as healthy as possible. But I think it's also important, you know, to treat yourself every once in a while for the sake of your mental kind of sanity. So, you know, I think it's all about finding a balance ultimately. But, you know, when you're training, obviously you want to be fueling with the right stuff. So that keeps you going. But you definitely need to treat every once in a while, I'd say.
So Nikki, that's great advice. You know, everybody, you do have to treat yourself, but I have noticed that when you wake up and, you know, if you just sort of create or come up with a game plan right on the spot, it doesn't always work. The idea of having a routine, I think, is really important, and it's good for you mentally as well. I found out, like, just getting outside, you just got to get outside, get away from the screen. You know, I noticed that maybe my basketball skills improved for the past 6 months because my screen break idea is I'm going to go and shoot some hoops in the backyard. But hey, how about that? A paradigm shift, meaning there's something that you just did not do pre-COVID that, you know, you do at ESPN or a way you train or anything like that, where you're like, wow, I never thought of doing it that way. But now that we're doing it this way, or I'm doing it this way, I might actually continue to do that. Donnie, has anything like that come up, or is your training still pretty much the same?
You know, I'd say for the last few years, something I've struggled with in training is that my knees, just like, basically my knees have kind of been hurting progressively more and more for the last few years. And I've never been someone who really believed in a lot of the small stability exercises and the strengthening of the joints. I believe in the little things, but never thought that that was worth including in the little things. And it was getting worse and worse. And then as soon as the world shut down, it was kind of, my knees were kind of at their peak in discomfort and were starting to really affect my running. And so my paradigm shift, I guess, is that this is kind of a second chance for me. This is one extra year to take care of these injuries, to finally reframe my thoughts on, you know, handling these minor injuries and doing the preventative work that it takes to keep it at bay. So now I think that that's super important. And as somewhat older of a runner compared to most of my competitors, it's even more important.
Yeah, I bet you Patrick can give you a little advice on, you know, 24 marathons. You definitely have to do the little things. Paradigm shift to Patrick Steigman at ESPN. Anything you're doing now that you guys never thought you would do and you might continue to?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's been some pleasant, unexpected consequences. You know, for me personally, you know, I've spent a lot of the last 3 or 4 years on airplanes flying overseas. And we found while the Zoom thing is not exactly ideal at all circumstances, we can actually communicate across time zones, across the world pretty effectively. And I think I may have fewer miles in me, airline miles in me in the future, which is a positive thing. I get more time to run. I think it's changed some of our programming approaches. I'm sure some of you were able to partake in watching The Last Dance, the 30 for 30 film series, an incredible series on Michael Jordan and the Bulls that got accelerated to be on our air in the middle of the summer at a time when we didn't have live sport. And it sort of galvanized the sports world to a certain degree. We were watching the 1990 Bulls as though it was 1990 era Bulls as though it was happening today.
Right.
And it changed sort of our approach in programming. And I also think if you even watch our broadcast now, you look at the NBA game cast, for example, the broadcasts, and we have technology we've been able to introduce, like the rail camera, which you may have seen, almost like a camera you would see at a track event that can follow up and down the court like you would in the 100-meter race. That's something that wouldn't have happened if there was fans in the stadium. Okay. So there are innovations that have come out of it that, again, you know, these will all be tweaked and adjusted as we move forward, but there's definitely been some positives, unexpected positives.
Okay, thank you. And last but not least, Nikki Downs, any paradigm shifts for you?
No major paradigm shifts in the way we're training as a group, I would say, although the one, this is kind of more of a minor thing, but we now show up to the stadium all dressed in our training kit, and we don't really use the locker room as much. So, you know, we kind of get there and turn up like you would kind of in your youth soccer days with the shin guards on and ready to go. And I don't know, there's something to be said for the efficiency, I think, of the way that practices are run now in the COVID era. So, you know, we'll see we'll see whether some of that sticks around. But so far, in terms of the team setting, most of the training has remained fairly similar.
Okay. As long as you're not showing up to Dillon Stadium riding your Schwinn Stingray and your uniform, that could be kind of a cool way to get to the game, though. All right, let's. This is a roundtable discussion of sorts. Donnie, Nikki, and Patrick, do you have a question for either one of the panelists? That's kind of, you heard them say something, you want to play off of it? Is there anything, Donnie, who do you want to talk to?
Yeah, I want to ask Nikki, kind of following up on that, that kind of paradigm shift back to youth soccer or whatever. So I grew up playing soccer, and I could swear I was going to be a professional soccer player. That was always my dream. And so when I hear you talk about that, it makes me think, when you have these games in a stadium with no crowd noise, I mean, that never bothered me as a kid. Does it feel like being a kid again, where like it's just maybe a couple parents and the coach cheering for you, or is it just weird because you've had stadiums in your past?
No, I mean, there's definitely an element where it's just kind of soccer in its purest form, right? Where it's just the players on the field, and, you know, that's how we all kind of grew up playing. So I would definitely say there's an element to that. Less distracting. Maybe sometimes you feel less pressure. Sometimes, you know, if the game's not going well and the crowd can kind of get on you, you can feel the frustration that might not exist, you know, when you're playing with no fans. But I think for a lot of guys, they're just so accustomed now, whether it be from their collegiate years or then their careers as pros, the fans have become just an integral part of the experience, the playing experience for most guys. So I think people do miss that, but no, I think there is an element too, for sure, of just kind of returning to soccer as we all kind of once knew it. So,
Patrick, do you have anything for anybody?
Yeah, for sure. As the non-athlete on the panel, I'd ask both Donnie and Nikki this. You are young, fit athletes and playing sports, you know, at the highest levels. There has been some conversation around the fact that the virus may or may not impact young people more differently than older people. We know that research is out there and that data is out there. But athletes, one of the things that make athletes successful is confidence and feeling invulnerable at times. How have you taken the approach of being responsible as young athletes in a world in which, you know, you feel like you can't be defeated at times? That's one of your strengths, but you actually there has to be some level of responsibility, as you guys have both mentioned, as it comes to protecting each other from the virus.
I can start. For me, I guess when I'm out there and I'm in a crowd or anything like that, I rarely think of it as my own personal health, and I think that's because I'm young and because I'm fit and because maybe athletes have some sort of natural headstrong, you know, characteristics. But so I never even think like, oh, like they're gonna give me it and something bad's gonna happen. But what kind of pushes me to want to abide by the rules and encourage others to abide by the rules is just that sense of social responsibility. So I don't think you have to be elderly or know someone elderly. I think just know that you are a part of society, and you know, no man is an island, and we all have an effect on everyone else. So it's just, you know, returning the shopping cart in the grocery store, just doing your part.
That's terrific.
Yeah, no, and just kind of along similar lines, I'd say I often think of it just in the context of my parents and my grandparents, and how I'd want people who are around them to be taking the proper precautions. You know, you'd kind of, that kind of gives you the feeling that you should do that around anyone else too. So I think oftentimes just thinking about your own family kind of brings it home, and obviously it's a responsibility that we all have, because that's the only way it works if we're all doing it. So
thank you both for that. I appreciate that.
That's good stuff. And I think our viewers can definitely take that stuff home with them for sure. That was a great question, Patrick. Nikki, you're the last one. Any question for Donnie or Patrick?
I have a question for Donnie. Just, I know he's not old, but as an older runner, how have you been able to kind of maintain, you know, your training regimen? And you kind of mentioned how now you're starting to feel your body a little bit more in these last few years. Like, as you've transitioned to kind of now like a pretty veteran athlete, what has changed about your eating, your lifestyle, your training regimen that has kind of kept you going at this stage in your career?
Well, I think it's less about what has changed and maybe more about what should have changed. So, I mean, I'm a few years older than you. I'm 30, and there's no reason that I think at 30, any effects of age should be holding me back from being as strong as I can be, as fast as I can be, as agile as I can be. And so I'm a hurdler, so agility is a slight part of my sport. You know, not as much as it is for you in soccer. But I'd say just starting at your age right now, it just becomes more and more important to do the little things that I have never thought were important. And I was told that every year growing up as a runner, as a collegian and post-collegian, and thought, I haven't seen evidence of that yet, and kind of just ignored it. So I'd say at this point in my age, there's nothing that should be holding me back if I'm doing everything right. And that's encouraging more than it is depressing.
Well, hey, you know, Donnie, if you look at the history of some of the great track athletes, right, they compete well into their 30s. When I see you running around and see you in races, to me, the only thing that's going to hold you back is if you just mentally don't want to run anymore. You definitely can continue for many, many years at the high level that you're at, for sure. But hey, Patrick, virtual races. We're coming a little bit to the close here. So how has it been doing the virtual races compared to the, I'm right there running on the road with everybody else? Could you give us a little insight into that, please?
Sure, and I've done dozens of the virtual races in the last 6 months, unexpectedly, but happily. Look, I miss the camaraderie and the conviviality and the community of being at a race with others. I miss the anxiety of being in the corral. I miss the optimism on days when I know I trained well, and the foreboding on days when I maybe didn't, or it's hilly, or the weather's bad. But at the same time, at least having some virtual element involved gives me some motivation. I've run more miles literally in the last, and again, this is perspective-wise, I ran my first marathon in 2012. I'm not a lifelong runner. I used to subscribe to that theory that said my sport is your sport's punishment, because running was a punishment when I was playing high school football or basketball, right? I now love it, but I've not been doing it for a long time. And so for me, having that extra motivation of signing up for a race, knowing that I maybe get a medal in the mail, maybe know that I can put my time on the board and compare it to others, even though the circumstances aren't the same, it makes me feel like I'm part of something larger. And to me, as someone who's not a lifelong runner, it gives me that little extra motivation to get out there and put the miles on the trail, even if I'm not particularly feeling it. And I will say that there's been some really smart approaches, right? Hartford Marathon has done this. I'm right now running a virtual race across the state of Wisconsin, my home state, in 242 miles in 30 days. And it just gives you an extra added incentive to get out there and do it. Hartford has done an incredible job with the local races that have been postponed and great virtual events. And I think the Hartford Marathon itself is going to be, especially with the charitable aspect of it, is extra motivation. I think it's going to be absolutely fantastic. And I'm looking forward to running that virtually as well.
Yeah. I mean, maybe we can kind of start to wrap things up. This has been a real honor being on this panel with you guys. Three very smart individuals that I think our viewers have really enjoyed listening to, and probably would like to hear some thoughts in the future. One of the takeaways I get from what you guys say is this sense of community. Like Don was saying, put the shopping cart back in the correct spot. You're doing this because societal needs or my social contract, whatever you want to call it. And I think the three of you have really knocked it out of the park in that department. We really thank you for joining us in this virtual world at the virtual expo for the Hartford Marathon Foundation, Hartford Marathon. And we'd love to talk to you again if you guys have the time. Thank you for being with us. Is there any final comments that anybody would like to make before we sign off?
No, just appreciate being on, and super fun to talk to all three of you.
Pleasure. Just keep running. I just say keep running. All right. This is, if nothing else, with this pandemic, just the one thing you can do is get out and run. So I encourage everyone to do so.
Thanks, Pat. Connie?
Yeah. Great to meet you all, and good to see you, John. And I look forward to the next time we can actually run the Hartford Marathon and be back on the streets of Hartford. So I can't wait.
Cheers, man. You got that right. All right, guys, thanks a lot. All you runners and racers out there, thank you for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you at the next Hartford Marathon Foundation virtual talk. See you later, guys, and be well.
Hey, this is a shout out to all the runners of the Hartford Marathon. I know they're calling it a virtual marathon, but you guys still have to run 26.2 miles, and you're not going to have fans cheering you on. So I'm going to leave you a thought. At the finish line is a great beer. Cheers.